Hey everyone, Brayden here coming to you with a long-awaited Mickey Views special report taking a look at what on earth is going on over at the Magic Kingdom inside Walt Disney World. What's happening at this hour is Disney is gearing up to demolish the Rivers of America and its attractions in order to put in a Pixar Cars-themed area, if you can believe it. It was right here on this channel 1 year ago that I told you guys I had heard from sources there was a new addition to Disney's long-teased Beyond Big Thunder expansion plan at the Magic Kingdom. Cars, more specifically a clone of the fan-favorite Radiator Springs Racers attraction Disney has out in California. Well, come the big D23 event in August last year, Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro announced to fans a new Cars-themed area was indeed coming to Frontierland. However, the main attraction in the Cars area in Florida is going to be all new, an off-roading inspired Cars ride themed after national parks and more recent World of Cars content. And this, on the one hand, is great because an expansion of the Magic Kingdom is desperately needed to increase capacity for a better guest experience on our end and in order to drive attendance for better revenues on Disney's end. A new Cars ride beyond Big Thunder sounds pretty cool. Well, the very next day, with all the fans on the way home from the big D23 fan convention, Disney dropped a blog post where they all of a sudden finally found that art that they just couldn't seem to find the prior day when the execs were up on stage in front of all the fans there, finally revealing where Cars is really going at the Magic Kingdom, and it's not beyond Big Thunder in the slightest. Instead of expanding the park, adding new things to the park while adapting and enhancing Walt's original attractions guests have been enjoying since opening day, as Imagineering did when they shortened Disneyland's Rivers of America to fit an entire Galaxy's Edge in the back of that park there, resulting in not only a brand new land, but also a beautifully enhanced vista for the train and riverboats. Meanwhile, at the lowly, most popular theme park in the world, a primary revenue generator for a Fortune 100 company, forget all of that, what we are getting is this, a replacement of the Rivers of America area, including Tom Sawyer Island and the Liberty Belle Riverboat attraction, trading that for a cartoon Cars with Eyes area themed to the Pacific Northwest right in the middle of 1800s Frontierland. This idea is so strange, even many friends of our show who are self-described Disney shills, they've even been saying this seems a little iffy. Former Imagineers have submitted their own 2 cents how they would adapt to the Magic Kingdom rather than just simply leveling, demolishing a quarter of it and saying, yeah, forget all that. This update is even out of step with the love that current Imagineers are giving other resorts, such as Disneyland Paris, that recently announced they are going to be plussing their rivers with new show scenes, paying homage to Walt, old Disney westerns, and Americana. Imagineering then announced a new backstory for Walt Disney World's Frontierland, which they now brand as a timeless land, highlighting America's different geographical regions. And it's about, quote, chasing your dreams in the American wilderness, writing your own folktale. Along with that Frontierland rebrand, we also got this more optimistic looking cartoonized vector graphic of the same art, accentuating the water features with the announcement that the Cars area here will be known as Piston Peak National Park. And then throughout all of this, there's been a very contentious debate happening between Disney fans that love the river and want to see it preserved, facing off with the other Disney fans that want to see new stuff, that are all about new stuff, or they just very much love the Cars film and really want this attraction. And the funny part with this is these two ideas, they shouldn't even be in conflict with each other. There's little reason why we can't have both the riverboat and Cars and a thematically consistent Frontierland. We should have gotten all of that exactly. In fact, that is the exact plan that I reported I was hearing about a year and a half ago, and it's my personal belief that the main reason that we aren't getting something like this lies at the feet of the near-term, budget-minded park executives that vied for a project plan that would remove this large water feature, thereby, in their minds, reducing future maintenance expenses. Recurring annual maintenance costs on the river range into the hundreds of thousands. Then there's the upcoming one-time big cost that they're likely looking at, such as the Liberty Belle needing a whole new boiler. Tom Sawyer Island has been begging for attention for decades. Instead of taking these icons that Disney themselves highlights as some of the most personal to Walt of anything at Walt Disney World and plussing them for future generations, why don't we just level the whole area? Problem solved. And of course, the irony is it's very likely that this new stuff will bring with it all sorts of new unforeseen maintenance costs and additional operational difficulties. Finally, on July 7th, 2025, the Rivers of America and its attractions permanently closed at the Magic Kingdom after delighting guests for 54 years. Disney's wasted no time putting walls up around the river, starting demolition on Tom Sawyer Island and draining the river. So this overhaul, it does indeed look to be happening. And I will say, I do like to see that Disney is making haste with this project, as painful as it will be to see some of these amazing historical artifacts just get totally wiped out, this whole beautiful area. The thing is it's been all talk and very little action for so many years at Walt Disney World. No matter how you feel about the merits of this Rivers of America replacement project, which we'll get into, the fact that Disney at least seems to recognize the haste that'll be required with this project, I do think that is good to see. The point of this video today is first we are going to take a look at the latest on the plans for the Magic Kingdom overhaul, which are quite extensive. There's a lot to get into on the current state of the project, what's actually happening on the ground, and then we are going to take a proverbial trip around the Rivers of America, seeing what the existing attractions have contributed to the Magic Kingdom, why I personally think demolishing them is going to be a big mistake for the park, and then most importantly, we'll get into why I think Disney is opting for this move, which ties in with other controversial updates happening at Walt Disney World, as well as ones yet to be announced. Starting with getting fully up to date on this Magic Kingdom overhaul project, here is what we know. At D23 last August, Disney officially announced concrete plans for a historic overhaul of the Magic Kingdom. This overhaul includes a Cars area replacing the Rivers of America, which will include a big outdoor rally race thrill ride, as well as a smaller family attraction. Then north of that will be a Villains Land, which is going to be phase 2 of this massive project that could end up spanning into the early 2030s. The Villains area will be opening up parts of the park previously not utilized by guests, making it technically an expansion. However, in the case of Cars, which Disney is counting as part of the expansion in order to call this stuff they're doing the park's largest expansion ever, this is really more of an overhaul of existing guest areas than it really is an expansion. Before getting into the details of the ride furthest into development, this summer we got some new details on the overall theme of this Cars area, which is of great importance in judging how this will all fit in with everything we already love in Frontierland and Liberty Square. In a June 2025 blog post, Disney writes that since the earliest days of the Magic Kingdom, guests have traveled across America, going from Liberty Square to Frontierland. You travel from the colonial American Northeast to the North Woods to New Orleans and to Arizona. So they're trying to rebrand Frontierland here. The thing is, it is true that you go across the Mississippi River, you do cross geographies going from Liberty Square to Frontierland. There are different geographies, different areas of the country that are represented there. The thing is, you also travel through time. That is a huge part of the Magic Kingdom. You go from the old world in Fantasyland to the new world circa the late 1700s, colonial America, and then you travel to the 1800s frontier in the time period that the settlers really did that. And this is not my opinion. There are literally years of construction stamped on the buildings as you go along. Nowhere in this theme, this timeline that you have in this area, do you find Piston Cup champion Lightning McQueen. I'm sorry. So that's the issue that the Imagineers are faced with here. So getting to that art that was included with the blog post in June, you can see one of the big features that is now really displayed prominently is you have a water feature similar to what you see in Pandora over in Disney's Animal Kingdom, a river that runs along the pathway next to you, and it looks like that is going to divide the Frontierland street from the Cars area. And then there's going to be trees and rock formations which feature sized down Piston peaks, which look to be trying to block off the view of the Cars attraction, the ATV attraction, from the 1800s street and the 1700s Liberty Square. And in a meeting that Imagineers had with some various creators, they told them that you're not going to hear the Cars attraction from the 1800s street. We'll see if that ends up being the case, but that is what Imagineering is aiming for here. Back to the art, across from the Riverboat Landing building, which looks to be staying here, it looks like we're going to be getting a waterfall waterfall, which could tie in that whole area quite well and be a really nice view from that building. There's going to be geysers by Big Thunder Mountain. It's possible even some elements from Tom Sawyer Island, some thematic elements, some playground style elements will survive into this area, like the barrel bridge that might be part of this overhauled area. So fans looking for the glass half full, look no further than this art. However, for the more apprehensive, the more suspicious here, Disney's bamboozled us before with concept art. And further, this isn't even concept art. This is a fun map, a misproportioned cartoon version of the original concept art fans roundly hated, where the details that we like, which we couldn't pick out so well in the original art, have been oversized and made more clear to butter us up as they go about removing the Liberty Belle and Tom Sawyer Island and demolishing the rivers of America, which is not going to be a very pleasant sight. Putting a pin in that, the litigation over the merits of the existing rivers of America, I want us to take a look, dive into the latest details on the attraction that is the furthest into development right now. At D23 Anaheim and D23 Brazil last year, Disney described this main Cars attraction as an off-road rally race, which will take the Cars movie characters somewhere they haven't been before. Racing through the Pacific wilderness, guests will meet new Cars characters and ride in a new kind of ride vehicle Imagineering is currently working on designing and testing. Because of the landlocked nature of this attraction, that is, guest pathway wrapping all the way around the entire thing, space for vast straightaways where cars can go high speed, like seen on Test Track, isn't as feasible here. The Test Track and Radiator Springs ride systems also require a sizable maintenance bay, which would eat up a chunk of the limited space they have to work with here, with no backstage areas bordering this attraction where they can hide that stuff away. This attraction is interesting in that it has to be on stage 360 degrees, much like the issues that Imagineers face when they were doing New Fantasyland and building the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. The areas where you see rock work in the concept art, that is where you're likely going to have the indoor parts of the attraction and any of the indoor facilities that they need. Because of this design limitation, we are likely looking at some sort of ride system where individual cars can move under their own power. The reason I suspect that is just because if you have a car that can drive itself around, they can be swapped in or out by simply driving them to and from a backstage maintenance facility when the park is closed. Taking this into account, fans online began to speculate that we could see this off-roading ATV-inspired attraction utilize trackless networked ride vehicles that drive themselves. That's right, self-driving ATVs, which do sort of exist, at least in concept. There's been some mock-ups that are on their way to that idea. These would allow for sharper turns, cars crossing each other's paths in ways that you can't do with the Test Track ride system, and this sort of system would best utilize the limited space that Imagineering has to work with. However, trackless isn't always that reliable. This trackless ATV idea doesn't seem quite ready for prime time, at least in terms of what third-party ride manufacturers have toyed with in the past, and we are talking about a make-or-break giant Magic Kingdom attraction located outdoors, somewhere where it rains constantly during the summer, where the cars are going to be going over bumps, shredding tires, going all over the place. This thing has to be reliable. And if you imagine driving from the Frontierland entrance sign down that street to Pecos Bill's on the other end of the street there, that's the width of this attraction. By the time that you could build up any sort of speed, you'd already need to be getting ready to slow down. You'd have to slow down pretty quickly. The physical constraints of this attraction suggest that rather than focusing on the thrill of speed, Imagineering is instead going to need to try to produce thrills through bumps, hills, and valleys during this attraction, maybe even splashing through water as well. That would be interesting. The reason I highlight all this is you can see why Imagineering is opting for the off-roading theme here. So Disney has to test this whole bumpy off-roading thrill ride concept. At D23 Brazil last November and South by Southwest this year, Imagineering showed off their test development work on this attraction. First, they went to the desert in Arizona where they rented ATVs and they drove around, which Imagineering said they did to get an idea of what sort of sensations they would want to recreate for an off-roading attraction. From there, they contacted a motocross company that built them a custom dirt track, a test track where they were able to obtain all sorts of measurements of different kinds of off-roading experiences. However, Disney was sure to note that this is not the layout for the ride itself. It is purely to get data measurements for when they go to design in the computer the ride that they're going to build at the Magic Kingdom. With all that data collected, Imagineering then said this year that they were buckling in on designing and producing the finished ride vehicle itself. We have one video of a 3D printed concept ride vehicle, which is not trackless. The vehicle appears to be a wild mouse, almost Mr. Toad's Wild Ride type of ride system, where the curvature of the track seems to be steering the vehicle itself. The vehicle runs along a metal fin on the ground. It seems like the front suspension of whatever vehicle they go with here, or at least in that mock-up, it is being steered by the track that you have on the ground there. If these teasers are anything to go by, it appears this ride system will involve a vehicle propelling itself, running along a track below that steers it. Doing it this way probably suggests we aren't going to see any airtime or any of those sought-after off-roading thrills, as the vehicle is going to need to stay on that metal guide throughout. Now, do note though, much like the test track that they built where they're doing all those measurements and things, Imagineering made clear when they showed this video, don't read too much into it. They said see it as a 3D sketch. That was the phrase they used. There was one other bizarre episode relating to the development of this attraction. It was literally an episode of a show on Imagineering's YouTube channel a few months ago where there was a segment previewing this upcoming Cars attraction, which reiterated everything we just covered, but then when they were talking about work progressing on the ride, the footage on screen is a map of Radiator Springs Racers in Disneyland. Somehow we keep coming back to Radiator Springs Racers. When I first told you guys about this coming to the Magic Kingdom, it was Radiator Springs Racers. Then Disney announces it and they're really wish-washy about what it even is. And then after the executives leave D23, then we find out what it is. And then people didn't like that art, so then they redid the art in a more cartoon form. And now we're back to showing maps of Radiator Springs Racers. This is just a bizarre project, you guys. So some fans are taking a lot of these early ideas, early tests. Don't take this too seriously, a lot of this sort of talk, as it's too early to say what we're getting here. Take it all with a grain of salt. Taking a look at the latest on the project itself in real life, the real life work happening on site at Walt Disney World, which is far from conceptual at this point. We now have shovels in the ground for real. Following the D23 announcement in August, Disney ran into a series of permitting issues with this project where they submitted incomplete permits to the South Florida Water Management District, one of the governing bodies Disney has to seek approval from as they're getting rid of a big waterway here. And even when Disney's doing smaller projects, there's oftentimes some sort of wetland that has to be relocated and they have to calculate water runoff, and it can become very, very complicated stuff making all these forms and calculations. Disney had to request a permit filing extension last year, which critics took as a sign that Disney was just spinning their wheels, and just like years past, they talk about expansions and nothing ever happens. Well, if you take a look at why Disney had to ask for extra time to complete their filing, what happened is that the Water Management District in a letter asked Disney for a slew of other drawings and measurements and plans for this filling in of the rivers of America, which is known as the 407 Basin Project. In February, they finally got the green light from the Water Management District to move forward with this project. The first step in expanding and overhauling the Magic Kingdom, though, was not closing or destroying the river. The first step was clearing land backstage that they're going to be working from in order to support all of the work inside the park. They needed to tear down lots of trees and then grade that land for surrounding staging areas where Imagineers and contractors will then set up camp, storing all sorts of equipment and materials needed in order to move forward with the work inside the Magic Kingdom itself. And just prepping the backstage sites is an especially large task with this project, as the main job here will be filling in the massive rivers of America. That means a big part of what Disney has to do here is clear out all these forested areas and make space to build up massive mounds of dirt and rock that will then need to be trucked from there into the former Rivers of America once the sealed riverbed itself has been demolished and the island has been leveled. Not to mention, once all that work is done and you have a graded site, then they're going to be working from those staging areas when they go to do the construction, when they go to build the Cars attractions, as well as the whole Villains Land, which we shouldn't forget about either. This expansion project is definitely going to span several years. In April, excavators showed up on site to the west of the Magic Kingdom Park, where silt fencing was put up, marking off the areas labeled gravel laydown yards in the drawings that were submitted to the Water Management District, and those excavators then got to work deforesting large areas to the west of the Magic Kingdom. Fast forwarding to current progress, crews are currently clearing the northwesternmost laydown yard labeled L4072. The plot neighboring the canal where the electrical water pageant barges rest during the daytime is being graded as we speak, and special site prep is happening there for something a bit more involved than an empty gravel lot where Disney's just gonna have a bunch of construction equipment laying around. As in this specific plot, there have been further permit filings that have revealed Imagineering's plan to place a sizable parking lot and series of trailer offices on the Pilot 2-3 laydown yard as part of Project SNKTL. It is presumed that this sizable parking lot spanning longitudinally from Big Thunder to Pirates will provide ample space for contractors and Disney creatives to park while working on site on this massive overhaul project. The fact that so many workers are expected to be parked simultaneously is a positive sign towards what I mentioned at the outset, and that is that it looks like Disney will be making haste with this project and not doing it piecemeal over what feels like decades, as was the case with Tron, for instance, at the Magic Kingdom. So inside the park itself, also right now, we have walls going up around the Rivers of America, obscuring the massive demolition site from guest view, because this is still a park that guests are in every day. Scrims have gone up at the Haunted Mansion to block the view of the river from that attraction's queue. There's even some construction markers in the Haunted Mansion graveyard, which is quite interesting. Hedges have been rolled into the riverboat landing building, helping to obscure some views. Walls along the pathway are continuing to go up around the Rivers of America. On Tom Sawyer Island, some props are tagged to be archived or reused. Teams have removed the Tom Loves Becky portion of Tom Sawyer's famous whitewashed fence, likely for archival in future museum use or something along those lines. Weeks back, Imagineering filed permits to remove various electrical systems and other infrastructure from the island prior to its full-scale demolition. Meanwhile, the Liberty Belle has been moved backstage to the Backstage Marina, which is at the northern end of Bay Lake outside of the Magic Kingdom Park itself. And I won't keep you guys in suspense on this one. I will tell you, sources of Mickey View suggest that the Liberty Belle will eventually find its way to one of the hotels in the area. Officially, Disney hasn't said what's happening to the Liberty Belle. Imagineering has not really said exactly what's going on, but they've said that it's going to stick around in some form. Our sources were hearing a year ago, this was the previous plan, that the riverboat, it was going to end up being permanently docked out front of Fort Wilderness on Bay Lake. Now it sounds like what the plan is that it's eventually going to end up at the Grand Floridian, docked out front of the Grand Floridian. This is not official, this is from Mickey View's sources, but that is what I have heard, is that is where we are going to see the beautiful Liberty Belle end up, and that would be a much better fate than the Liberty Belle being scrapped, so fingers crossed there. Meanwhile, demolition work is underway on another casualty as a result of this project, the Walt Disney World Railroad. After being without the railroad for years and years due to Tron, and then the closures of 2020 further delaying work of both Tron as well as the full track replacement around the Magic Kingdom to improve the stability and reliability of the Walt Disney World Railroad, the full retrack was finally completed and we got the railroad back a few years ago. And now that brand new track is being ripped out behind Big Thunder Mountain, if you can believe it. Remember, Big Thunder itself is undergoing its own retracking, and it's getting a new maintenance bay for its new ride vehicles on its new track. So that might have something to do with the Walt Disney World Railroad rail being removed between the backstage Big Thunder work and the onstage Big Thunder work. But of course, we also know for the next few years, there's going to be crews and vehicles and supplies that'll be crossing the former Grand Circle path of the railroad. So removing the railroad track from this quadrant of the park entirely just makes crossing that area area easier as they gear up to do all this work in this part of the park. And there's also the possibility that once this is all said and done, the shape or route of the Walt Disney World Railroad in this area will be slightly different come the late 2020s or early 2030s, whenever we finally get the Grand Circle Tour back. And you may be wondering, wait, Brayden, is the railroad closed? Its track is all ripped up here, so it can't be running in a circle right now. Well, since early July, with the closure of Tom Sawyer Island, the Liberty Belle, and the Rivers of America, the Walt Disney World Railroad ceased its Grand Circle Tour, and it is now running in shuttle mode between the Main Street station and the Fantasyland station at Storybook Circus. For the foreseeable future, starting now, the railroad will just be slowly reversing from the Main Street station back to Storybook Circus, and then pressing forward back to the Main Street USA station, which is a bit of an odd setup, safe to say, but I actually am quite happy with what operations did here, because the other option was just to park the trains like they did when they were working on Tron, and just having it parked for a photo op, of course, means that many of those cast members that work on the train, they would be without those roles. So this is a way to keep the trains moving, keeping the cast members working, and giving the guests the opportunity to actually ride on the train and the trains being alive. But nevertheless, this is still one of the many ways that this massive overhaul is making an impact on the guest experience at the Magic Kingdom, and will continue to for years to come. And all of that for what could also be a quite different guest experience once everything is said and done. Removing that massive vista that you have with the Rivers of America, removing that temperature regulating breeze that you have that comes off the water, the sights and the sounds of the Sternwheeler breathing, which you can hear from even outside the Magic Kingdom. It's so awesome. For 54 years, while waiting for the Haunted Mansion, you got to enjoy this beautiful view of an entire quadrant of the park, this scenic vista. We've been giving Disney a hard time about they're putting ATVs with eyes driving past the Haunted Mansion queue in the Magic Kingdom. Well, is it really going to be like that? Maybe not. Judging by the cartoon that Disney provided us most recently, maybe you're just going to see a big guest pathway, but even in that best case scenario, is that an improvement over what we already enjoy? Is this new attraction for the sake of a new attraction going to add or subtract from the park experience we currently enjoy at the Magic Kingdom? That's not being negative to ask. That's what Walt Disney himself would ask. Disneyland will never be complete. We will always be plussing. Is this a plus? Or is this addition via subtraction? There's a lot to contemplate here. This is a huge change that'll make the Magic Kingdom in Florida the first Disneyland-style park in history not to have a big river circling an island. I think a lot of fans dismissing this as no biggie or whatever Disney does is fine don't understand how big this is. Maybe they're starting to, watching the railroad be ripped apart, Tom Sawyer heading to the dump, the river draining. We are facing down the barrel of another Epcot crater level event, where there is going to be a massive dirt patch taking up a quarter of the most popular theme park on Earth for an extended period of time. And the most intrusive part of that isn't the Villains expansion, which is going way in the back of the park. The part of this project that is going to be imposing its presence in existing areas is for the sake of adding a Cars ride of all things to Frontierland of all places. So now that we're caught up on the latest with the project itself, we can get into the good stuff, which is the debate that fans have had over the Rivers of America these past many months. It gets into some deep questions about what Disney offers that their competitors don't, what a theme park is about, what the Magic Kingdom is about, what Walt would want. Proponents of this change say to me, Brayden, what's so bad about Cars replacing the Rivers of America? Cars is a great franchise. You said yourself the Magic Kingdom desperately needs more capacity. The Rivers of America takes up a serious chunk of the Magic Kingdom. How often do you go to Tom Sawyer Island? It's usually one of the lower attended areas in the park. Who rides the Liberty Belle every visit to the Magic Kingdom? Probably some viewers are nodding their head right now, but the average family doesn't have the riverboat at the top of the list of attractions that they want to ride. This area takes up so much space. I don't see any long lines. I don't see any lightning lanes in this part of the park. Therefore, it's a failure. Get rid of it. Say the same folks who simultaneously complain about the parks being too crowded and feeling like a concrete jungle. Okay, got it. But seriously, the easiest counter to this line of argument, I'm confident most fans would agree with, and this is something the Spreadsheet executives making these decisions seem to misunderstand, is a theme park is not a McDonald's kitchen where every every square inch needs to pay for itself. That's an amusement park, that's a carnival, that's a circus. A Disney theme park, in stark contrast to the aforementioned, puts seemingly irrational amounts of money, time, labor, and creative into theming, placemaking like landscaping, facades, ornamentation, railings, trash cans, and yes, rivers. Running a Disney park, you will incur costs that don't directly add to revenue in any kind of easily measurable way. And that's why nobody did it before. Disney embracing those costly elements without expectation of direct return is how they've stood alone as the city on the hill in themed entertainment for so long. Walt created a whole new industry this way. And an anything goes type of fan might say that's an idealist notion, leaving a low attendance part of the park there for beauty and atmosphere. We should forget about that. Disney is a corporation. Their job is to make sure that every square foot of every segment is maximizing revenue. It is logical to cut things that don't directly bring in lots of money. But that is exactly what the suits were saying 70 years ago. Very early on in Disneyland's development, Walt's entourage showed the plans to amusement industry heads, and they could not fathom what Walt was doing with his park plan back in the early 50s for this same exact reason. That's why they expected it to fail so spectacularly and told Walt to save his money. Industry heads plain told Walt his plan would be a financial disaster. Landscaping doesn't increase attendance. Ships and castles don't produce revenue. Why bother? The riverboat attraction isn't going to make any money. You're going into debt for this? And Walt said yes. Actually, for the sake of spending this video talking about Walt the real person and not Walt the basket of convenient quotes executives like to pull out to justify whatever they want, Walt said of the amusement industry heads advising him against spending money on zero revenue attractions like his riverboats, something a bit more spirited. Fast forward 70 years and the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland are some of the most consistent revenue generators for a Fortune 100 company. The Magic Kingdom is the most attended theme park in the world. Clearly, this man understood a thing or two that pencil pushers didn't then and apparently still don't. Clearly, there is something more to the Magic Kingdom formula than IPs, the newest e-ticket rides, the castle, and popcorn buckets. Something deeper to it that doesn't show up on the spreadsheets in dollars and cents. And we can get an idea of what that secret recipe, or special spice rather, is if we go back to the inception of the Disney parks. Not to drop an address unknown historical documentary on you right here, but in the late 30s and early 40s, Walt Disney has created the gold standard in animated feature films. 1940, suddenly his little studio is a juggernaut, selling company stock to the general public. The company is no longer driven by, let's make some art and pray that we make some money along the way too. There's now major investors in there who say, show me the money, and oh yeah, that art you made is nice, I guess. 1941, employees are striking. 1942, America's in a world war, and then when the war ends, there is no money or manpower for another Snow White scale project. So 1947, Walt naturally becomes obsessed with model trains. He's gifted a model train, and pretty soon it has its own elaborately themed environment on a tabletop. Then it's a functioning 1/8 scale railroad in his backyard, and throughout Walt's rail fanning episode, he kept running into this idea of a park. It's an idea that he had mulled over several times in the past. He decides to take a train ride with Disney legend Ward Kimball to the Chicago Railroad Fair cross-country. And while in that region, after having stopped by the Railroad Fair, he ended up taking a detour from Chicago to a museum complex he'd already visited twice that decade, located in Dearborn, Michigan, the Henry Ford Museum, and its piece of living American history, Greenfield Village. Not only did Greenfield Village have a train circling it, the village also featured a replica steamboat on a small river circling an island. That steamboat was a 60-foot replica containing the original engine of a 19th century steamer Thomas Edison often traveled on in Florida called the Swanee. As soon as Walt arrived home after this trip, he sent out an internal memo detailing his own vision of a park, combining aspects of a museum, an amusement park, European parks he had visited, and Hollywood cinema, all into a nostalgic and safe place where people could bring their families and have fun together. And it wasn't called Disneyland. At that time, Walt was describing what he called Mickey Mouse Park, a small park he planned to build on the 16 acres Disney owned across the street from their studio in Burbank, California. Walt ended up presenting the concept art and plans for his Mickey Mouse Park to the Burbank City Council in 1951, and they wanted none of it. They told him, "We don't want people falling in the river, we don't want merry-go-round squawking all day long," and you know the rest of the story. Walt's Mickey Mouse Park concept grew into the much larger Disneyland Park, which ended up in Anaheim, became a huge hit, and later spawned the Magic Kingdom in Florida. The point is, before the Magic Kingdom, before Disneyland, even before the addition of a castle to Walt's vision of a family theme park, there were two attractions that were core to his idea: a railroad and a river, a turn-of-the-century steam locomotive, and a 19th century steamwheeler encircling a land. Why? Who's to say for sure? This is core stuff. Imagineering, which claims not to repeat themselves, or at least tries not to, they repeated these two specific aspects, a railroad and a river, at virtually all Disneyland-style parks that ended up following. The river clearly matters. It is a part of the formula no other company has been able to top. Disney legend Marvin Davis recalls, quote, "I think Walt took more actual interest in the river than anything else." We can speculate Walt's reasoning with the steamboat and the train had to do with them being nostalgic pieces of American history even back then, which lent themselves to the immersive, cinematic, time machine type American theme park Walt invented, where you park your car and walk into this place where you are immersed in the past or the future, Europe or the tropics, another time where the cars are either antiques from Walt's childhood or they're in the land of tomorrow, cars so small kids can drive them. And Walt insisted the pieces of the past, these aspects of a living museum, had to be as realistic to their respective times as possible in order to really feel right. The wrought iron that lines the top of the Main Street buildings, it had to be real iron. Walt turned down the far cheaper and easier plastic alternative. And in the case of the Mark Twain riverboat that debuted in 1955, it was twice as long and twice as historically accurate as the replica steamboat Henry Ford had built, which inspired Walt in the first place. The paddle wheeler that Walt put in Disneyland was the first of its kind built in 50 years. And it was not cheap to do. Walt went into personal debt to make it happen and absolutely insisted on it. We've speculated why. He isn't around, so we can't ask him. What we do know is that what he did worked, and worked better than anyone else's concept before or after. Is that something Josh D'Amaro and Bob Iger want to mess with? I mean this to say, I'm not sure this change, the impact of it has been fully thought through or comes from the most noble of motivations. Before getting into those motivations or some of the other arguments, a quick look at the history and significance of Magic Kingdom's river in particular. The hearsay for decades has been part of how Roy talked Walt into doing the theme park first when it came to the Florida project before his experimental city that he wanted to focus on was, hey, we need the revenue coming in, we need an East Coast Disneyland, and not only do you get a bigger park, you specifically get lots more water. Walt Disney bragging on the blessing of size to the select group of wed Imagineers who were in the Florida project room planning this all out, Walt said to them, "It'll be just like Disneyland, except we'll have more water." Walt's Imagineers had all sorts of plans for the area, many that had to wait till after opening. After Walt passed and his brother saw his dream through, the Magic Kingdom's river opened with the Admiral Joe Fowler riverboat attraction, circling a rather sparse, unpopulated island. And eagle-eyed viewers might be saying, wait a second, Brayden, I haven't seen a twin smokestack riverboat at the Magic Kingdom. Well, that checks out because in 1980, it was dropped by a crane in dry dock, completely destroying the boat's hull. Its steam engine was salvaged and sent to Tokyo Disneyland for their riverboat. A couple of years after Magic Kingdom opening is when we got the Richard F. Irvine steamwheeler you can identify by its single smokestack, which was completely rebuilt from the hull up in 1996, after which it came to be known as the Liberty Belle, we know so well today. When you head towards Frontierland at the Magic Kingdom, you pass a small detail you probably never noticed, and that is a small stream that separates Frontierland from Liberty Square, which runs right underneath you, and it signifies you heading over the Mississippi River. The Rivers of America itself is intended to be an amalgamation of all the rivers in the United States frontiersmen traveled throughout the pioneering age. On the river, there used to be a Davy Crockett Explorer Canoes attraction, which still runs in Disneyland and Tokyo, but ceased operation at the Magic Kingdom in 1994. Magic Kingdom's river also featured the Mike Fink keelboats of Davy Crockett fame, which you can find on Disney+, highly recommended. 2 of those boats ran seasonally each year from opening day in 1971 till 2001. Also, some very deep lore: one watercraft Walt wanted for the Rivers of America alongside the Sternwheeler was a sidewheeler. Disneyland didn't end up getting a sidewheeler, and neither did Walt Disney World's river. However, the year Walt Disney World opened, the Seven Seas Lagoon did get a sidewheeler. 2 actually, the Osceola-class steamers, which brought guests to the Magic Kingdom before the first ferries were built. Disney bragged in Walt Disney World's opening pictorial souvenirs that these Osceola-class steamers used walking beam engines unlike any built in the past 100 years. Even after Walt's death, the spirit of building authentic, functioning pieces of American history was still very much alive at WED. And later in the 90s, a Magic Kingdom style park finally got a sidewheeler on the park's river, that being the Molly Brown at Disneyland Paris, a very unique vessel indeed. Back on Walt Disney World's Rivers of America, you can see when Walt Disney World opened, we had one riverboat, some canoes, a couple scenes like the Fisherman's Dock, which is still there today, but the island in the middle was uninhabited, as was the site of Big Thunder, which is pretty crazy to see. Well, Disney quickly got to work on Tom Sawyer Island after Walt Disney World opened, with the island itself opening in 1973. Walt Disney World's Tom Sawyer Island is a faithful expansion on Walt's original Tom Sawyer Island he added to Disneyland shortly after that park opened as well. And what's special about Tom Sawyer Island is, according to Disney historian Jim Korkis, Tom Sawyer Island is the only part of Disneyland that Walt single-handedly designed himself. Walt's layout artist who did the layout for Disneyland and later the Magic Kingdom and Epcot, Marvin Davis, he just couldn't seem to get the fort set up quite the way Walt wanted it. Walt took the plans home one night and worked throughout the night redesigning the island to his exact specification, inspired by a cardboard fort he had made as a child. He designed it to be a place where kids could experience everything Walt wanted to experience when he was a kid as it pertained to the frontier that he wasn't able to. And this is where we get to some of the points that the Rivers is knocked for. Some fans trying to swallow this idea of removing the Rivers of America say things like, well, Tom Sawyer Island isn't really popular. Most guests don't go on the riverboat most trips, and I would say that is a fair statement. However, some people are just insane and say things like, nobody goes on the island, it's basically abandoned, actually, no one really likes the riverboat, Brayden, you're just all of a sudden pretending that you do in order to be contrarian. Let the record show, long before even the rumors of Disney wiping out this area for Cars and Villains happened, I made the point of going to the Magic Kingdom on October 1st, 2021, the 50th anniversary of the park, not to wait in a 1-hour line for a commemorative popcorn bucket to sell on eBay. No, instead I lined up for the riverboat, where I was the first guest on board that attraction on the day it turned 50 years old. Maybe, and hear me out on this, fans keep saying that they like the things Disney's destroying because they really do. They're not just, trying to find things to complain about. They actually like a lot of stuff at Walt Disney World, and it's a lot of that stuff which keeps getting destroyed to put in new intellectual properties. And by the way, having filmed tons of footage for this video of the Rivers of America area, most times of day, there is a decent number of people on the Liberty Belle steamboat and the rafts and the island. And it is true that Tom Sawyer Island is seldom packed with guests. Do you think that Walt didn't think of this? The Imagineers are geniuses. They designed the island to be exactly what it is today. An isolated attraction you have to take a raft in order to get to, where you can escape the crowds and where families with children have space to relax. It is intentionally surrounded by water on all sides. It is intentionally low on spectacle and attendance and more focused on serenity and pure Disney detail. You know how lately Disney's been building nondescript areas set inside of intellectual property universes for guests to explore so they can tell their own story? That's Tom Sawyer Island. It is a place that was designed for kids to imagine themselves being pioneers on the American frontier. I am not speculating on this. For those who doubt me, I have here the Imagineering Field Guide to the Magic Kingdom, written by the Imagineers. And in this book, the Imagineers on Tom Sawyer Island, they say so succinctly, "Oh, to be young again. Tom Sawyer Island, the largest playground in all of Magic Kingdom, recalls a time of carefree youth. The isolation of the island from the rest of the park offers kids a sense of independence and gives parents a chance to rest in the shade for a while." So this area was designed to be exactly the way it is. And areas like this are becoming increasingly rare at Disney. Near the completion of Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Disney ripped out the play area kids used to have outside the entrance to Splash Mountain. And the reason that was there was so that kids who didn't meet the height requirement had somewhere fun to play while other members of their party went on the attraction. And we often overlook stuff like that because most Disney fans online are adults that meet the height requirements for those e-ticket attractions, and those making the decisions about what's in the parks are also adults. But providing a once-in-a-lifetime experience to children is a big part of why these parks exist. Back to the Imagineering Field Guide, listen to this on the living history aspect. Quote, "The fact this wondrous place resides on an island required yet another vehicle in order for guests to gain access. The rafts puttering across the rivers add kinetics to the landscape of Frontierland and put folks in a mode of transportation they don't typically experience. The Magic Kingdom is in large part about nostalgia, experiencing parts of the past that are long gone outside its gates, Tom Sawyer's Rafts being yet another great example." And then Imagineering gets into why I think the river should stay, and it would be such a mistake to get rid of it. Quote, "The Rivers of America serves as a connection between Liberty Square and Frontierland. It provides us with kinetics. The rivers provide an evocative backdrop to all the activity that has sprung up around it. It's romantic and inviting and convinces you that something exciting is right beyond the bend." Not only does the river take up space in this park, it does much more than that. For one, it provides a reassuring experience where guests' eyes can escape the visual intrusion of concrete and masses of people. They can look into the distance and see Big Thunder. It's right there on the water. In reality, it's quite a walk. Almost from behind the castle. You clear the Hall of Presidents, you look down there, and there is the bayou with the logs splashing down. The sound of guests screaming, it carries across the water. It is not a static area. The area sounds alive, it feels alive. You can hear the idle of the steam engine, the faithful reproduction of a 19th century machine that literally breathes. As you walk down the street, you have a steam wheeler going past, rafts puttering by, Harper's Mill running. Meanwhile, you can see the headliner attractions right there beyond the bend, and along the way you have all of these incredible pieces of Americana. You have the country bears waving at guests on the riverboats, mom and dad watching Big Thunder from the dock on the island. Kids are set free to roam Tom Sawyer Island. The caves, they are so off the beaten path, many guests don't even know they're there. Bears do though. Also in there you have Walt's Fort, the Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn references. There's even references on the island to other Disney content that you can pull up right now on Disney Plus, like Walt's early animated short, The Old Mill, which I highly recommend checking out because not only is it an excellent work of art, but once you've seen that, next time you make your way over here to Harper's Mill at the Magic Kingdom and you see that bluebird in the missing tooth in the gear, it'll make it all the more clear to you that the place you paid an absurd ticket price to enter isn't just an amalgamation of the latest thrills and flavor of the week intellectual properties. It is also a living piece of history. It is not a static, aging museum. It is a collective, ongoing work of art comprised of real antiques, reproductions, and the latest technology, connecting the American Revolution in 1775 to Mark Twain's The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, published in 1876, Walt's childhood fort he built in the early 1900s, the Silly Symphonies from 1937, Walt's designing of the island itself in 1955, Imagineering building a second one in Florida in 1973, to over the past few decades, the latest generations of Imagineers tearing down and faithfully rebuilding much of this, including the mill, where they put in more reliable hardware, they added new effects, new nods, new hidden Mickeys. You paid to enter a park that has details like this everywhere if you take the chance to learn about them and appreciate them. And the genius is, even if you are the least in tune guest who consciously notices absolutely none of this, you still benefit from the aesthetics, the beauty, and the kinetics the Rivers of America contributes to the park. Would you rather spend an hour on a park bench in a kinetics-free, static, crowded cement palace, or the Rivers of America? The choice is obvious, and this is the spot that Walt chose to spend much of his time enjoying at the original Magic Kingdom. This was one of his favorite spots, according to Disney legend Marvin Davis and Marty Sklar. He would take a sketchbook and he would just sit and look at the river and the rafts going to Tom Sawyer Island. He loved it. The river area, it breaks up the congestion, it moves guests astonishingly from a haunted mansion to 1780s Boston to the Wild West flawlessly without a thing feeling out of place, and all the while building anticipation for the attractions seen around it. It makes the park feel bigger. It's the quadrant that you'll find yourself drifting towards in the heat of August or the crowds of Thanksgiving. The steam whistle is an iconic part of the Magic Kingdom soundscape that can be heard even outside the park, over at the Polynesian and the TTC across the Seven Seas Lagoon, beckoning you in like when a movie begins. Not to mention, the river itself, it regulates the temperature of the park, and we all know the Magic Kingdom certainly needs that. All the while, for a decade now, effects all over the island don't work that should. I believe that there have been countless proposed pluses by the Imagineers that have been rejected over the years because they wouldn't directly make money. They turned off the burning cabin effect seen from the steamboat long ago because allegedly the gas lines corroded and they couldn't be bothered to pay to maintain the most popular theme park on Earth. But please tell us how these attractions are without merit. Tell us how it's the fault of Tom Sawyer or the Liberty Bell that budget-minded executives have foregone upgrades, kicked the can down the road, not plus these attractions in ways that Walt would have done several times by now, and therefore, you know what, just forget about it. Just tear it all down. That's pathetic. Some point out, the island, it isn't very ADA compliant. The caves are too narrow. Upgrade them. Make it accommodative for all guests. Add in new things along the way. That would be a great opportunity if Imagineering were allowed to go do that. And then, as we've talked about at length, there's other people that say, this area doesn't see much attendance. Awesome. The number one complaint at Disney, besides price, is crowds. Here's your antidote to that. It was designed and built specifically as an escape from the rest of the Magic Kingdom. Should we get rid of Central Park while we're at it? It's so much space just wasted. Just think about it. How much revenue per square foot does that bring in? Zero? Think how much tax revenue the city would bring in if we slapped 60 billionaire towers on this baby. You know what it feels like when you remove the soul of a park? There's a reason Disney's Hollywood Studios isn't at the top of fans' favorite Walt Disney World park lists. It's an amalgamation of conflicting ideas. Random things. You walk down Hollywood Boulevard and the place, it does have a soul. It's the Hollywood that never was and always will be. They have the Brown Derby there, the Glenn Miller music playing. It's awesome. Then you step off to the animation courtyard and there's a bunch of random stuff mixed with neglected, poorly utilized spaces. Then suddenly you're in Toy Story and then Star Wars. And there's all sorts of awesome stuff to be found in all those areas along the way. I don't mean to discount each individual component of that park. The point is that the Magic Kingdom has a much greater cohesiveness to it, a glue, if you will, that takes what should be entirely contradictory times, places, and ideas and gives it this overall nostalgic, Americana theme that makes it feel like a full course meal. And I am here to say I believe the river is an important part of that, which no sane executive seriously interested in the long-term success of this business would completely demolish. And don't mistake me for saying this is all a museum, we can't touch anything. We know Disney is stretched for space, particularly in the instance of the Magic Kingdom. Could they shorten the river, make the island smaller, and add 2 areas? Yes, of course they could. This brings us to why I think the river is getting axed. In this case, what I think happened is Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro and Walt Disney World President Jeff Volley kept kicking around what to put beyond Big Thunder. We know that years back the plan was Encanto and Coco, as you might recall from that quite bizarre D23 Expo a few years ago. Encanto was later worked into the Tropical Americas update, now under construction at Disney's Animal Kingdom. So in the end, they settled on Cars and Villains for the Magic Kingdom, something like Radiator Springs Racers and Villains back there. And they said, well, we can put Cars behind Big Thunder, we can put Villains back there, and that's actually a plan that I think is pretty solid, because Cars being obscured behind Big Thunder and the river, that doesn't really affect the theming of Frontierland proper or Liberty Square much at all. In fact, I think seeing the mountain range back there, Monument Valley, behind Big Thunder would actually be a pretty cool sight. But I think what was the real limitation to this idea is the fact that the river is an ongoing operational expense. It's different from CapEx. People will listen to what I'm saying throughout this video and they might wonder, Brayden, how can you call the executives cheap? How can you call Disney cheap when they're investing in the parks massively? That is what we are talking about here. And this is a very fair thing to wonder. What Disney's building here, these expansions and overhauls that we are talking about, that is coming out of a special capital expenditure budget that the parks have been allocated. And there's a lot more to this when it comes to CapEx. There's all sorts of incentives that Disney gets to reinvest in their business. There's tax incentives and things like this because the government wants to motivate companies to reinvest in their business. The hair in the soup here is the OpEx, the operational expenditure at the park operations level at Walt Disney World. Operational expenditures, that is the primary expense if you are the president of Walt Disney World that you want to trim wherever you can, because there's no special bonus that you get from the government or from your bosses in Burbank for spending tons of money on OpEx. The biggest cost at Walt Disney World already is labor and keeping everything running right at the attractions, the restaurants, everything you have around the property. That is no penny in the bucket either. So considering that, the park operations side of the question, consider the fact that I have heard in the past that if the Liberty Belle stays, it is going to need a new boiler. Meanwhile, Tom Sawyer Island is an ongoing labor cost that doesn't bring in any sort of lightning lane revenue. The rafts always need maintenance. Water brings with it all sorts of expenses like erosion control and testing and all sorts of things that they have to do. It is this massive area inside the park envelope that they already have to pay to maintain, while this thing that they have to spend all this money on is bringing in next to nothing in additional revenue per square foot in terms of retail, dining, or queue related upcharges. So this one has definitely been on the we don't like this list at park operations for quite a while. We could go into a whole other tangent about what happened to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at the Magic Kingdom. Let's just say this is not a new phenomenon. So doing something about this problem child, the Rivers of America, has been a target of someone's ire for quite a while at Disney. And as I previously stated in this video, at Walt Disney World, we have the biggest river. So shortening it in some way, we understand, I think the fans would understand that that's being cost effective. That's something where they need to fit in more in that northwestern quadrant without having to move roads and waterways back there. We get it. But instead of doing that, which I wager would be cheaper, someone, my guess is Jeff Volley, said, let's remove the river entirely. It may cost more to fill in this massive area than just simply shortening it, but operationally, this makes the most sense. And that I mean dollars and cents, because there after lightning lanes, they're after all sorts of upcharges, and in putting cars here in this area, cloning Radiator Springs Racers, that idea is dead on arrival because it's only themed on one side out in California. And the whole reason that you clone attractions is that you are saving on the design costs. All the drafting that you need to do, you don't have to meaningfully change the original blueprints. So once you already have to do that, that's all out the window. So what I believe happened is we went from the original idea, something like mirroring California's Radiator Springs Racers behind Big Thunder. And interesting, there was an Imagineering episode that came out when we were talking about this Radiator Springs rumor where they had a mirrored model of Radiator Springs Racers at Imagineering. So I highly suspect that this was considered, but now that you're replacing the river and you're putting it further south in this area, the attraction needs to be themed 360 degrees. We have to build a 360 degree themed Cars ride. The physical constraints make a higher speed attraction here infeasible anyways, so let's do a new ride system, a new theme, and just like that, it is willed into existence that a bumpy Cars ride is going where the southern portion of the Rivers of America currently resides. They run it up the flagpole to CEO Bob Iger, who loves Cars Land, something that happened under his watch as CEO, which was a huge success. It's an awesome land. Bob Iger says, oh, you're gonna do something like that out in Florida? Cool. It's not like Iger is really all about the Walt living history stuff that we've been talking about in this video. He probably sees that stuff as a liability, if anything, because with American history, you have to contend with cultural depictions. What's tasteful today might not be tomorrow. Make the Frontierland Shootin' Arcade into a DVC lounge while you're at it. If you made it this far in the video, you're probably saying, oh brother, what can we do? Well, at this point, it's too late to bid farewell to those classic attractions, those Rivers attractions, which is very sad to say. It's like when they started in on demolishing Innovations West at Epcot. Disney's committed, we said what we said, we just have to sit back and see what happens and pray for a better outcome than what befell the middle of Epcot. And some purists would actually accuse me of bias here, as I know that there are people working on these projects watching this video right now who I do have a great deal of faith in. I know that they want to make something that exceeds our expectations. I know that they want to do a good job. There's a decent chance what we end up getting here ends up being better than we expect. The mistake here is not Disney trying something new. The mistake here is not Disney investing in the parks. The mistake is getting rid of the river itself. A completely avoidable decision. I think with everything I've laid out for you guys in this video, we can say with confidence, the prospect of the most popular Disney castle park in the world not having a large river would have Walt going, excuse me, it's absurd. But Disney's doing it. So now all eyes are on the Magic Kingdom crater, with us all hoping Piston Peak and Villains Land turn out awesome. Even if they do, yes, replacing the rivers in order to do so is still an unnecessary foul, but honing in on these new attractions here as they come to life and when they open, hopefully in a vacuum, they turn out awesome, and there is a decent chance that ends up being the case. I really enjoyed the Cars movies as a kid. I was a 7-year-old boy when the first one premiered. My brother and I, we collected the die-cast toys growing up. There's Cars videos here on this channel from way back. I am far from agnostic on Cars being a feature of Walt Disney World. I think it's a great franchise. I look forward to the day when I get to bring my own kids to Walt Disney World and they get to experience a Cars attraction. My well-emphasized at this point opposition comes from a place of the why and the how. The refusal by the executives to push the envelope of the park, more opening day attractions destroyed, the theming muddled. Frontierland is about exploring your dreams in the wilderness? Really? Do you guys even know what you're selling? You're selling Walt's dream of a place that brings American history and fantasy to life. You leave today at the Magic Kingdom. An ATV adventure through the wilderness is not leaving today. That is today. This is trend chasing. You can probably find a place like this within 30 minutes of where you are sitting right now, minus the IP. This is not a rare thing to experience being on an ATV. And if you read the 1954 Disneyland prospectus, it says on the very first page in bold typesetting, nothing of the present exists exists in Disneyland. I just think it would have been easy and even lower cost to just shorten the river and just configure this whole thing way better. Keep the riverboat circling a shortened playground escape at the Magic Kingdom, have Monument Valley beyond Big Thunder, put a Villain's Land back there. The idealist side of the Walt Disney World fan base would win because the river would stay, and the people that want new things to experience, the we just want new stuff crowd, no matter what the cost, that side of the Walt Disney World fan base, they would win too. The Cars fans, the thrill junkies, the Villains fans, the families with kids, rail fans, historians, riverboat enjoyers, people looking for a relaxing escape from the rest of the park, everyone could have won. The only person that wouldn't have won in that case is whichever executive has this huge axe to grind with the rivers of America. So we'll see what happens, and whatever does, I will be right here to bring you all the latest, so make sure that you are subscribed with those notifications on. Coming away from this video, hopefully now you have a bit more appreciation for what Walt and the Imagineers created, and here's to hoping some rational suit at Disney asks in the 11th or 13th hour here at this point, I guess, do we really have the conviction to replace something that we know works but needs some love with a giant Epcot-style multi-year dirt patch crater, and on the other end, best case scenario, will be a bumpy Cars ride? Does that seriously sound like a bet worth us making? Apparently so, and this project is far enough along now with the river being drained and they're starting to take the track out that the river boat used to run on. You know, I think that pride has set in with the executives, with the people involved. I think that they've convinced themselves that this is the way, and all we can do is hope that they are right. If you enjoyed this video, in the description area below, you can find some of the incredible Disney books that contributed greatly to the immense amount of historical information in this video. If you buy through those links, Amazon gives us a small commission at no additional cost to you. I also want to give a shout out to our patrons over on Patreon for sticking with us through this very, very eventful, very busy time over here. That is the best place to support us, patreon.com/MickeyViews. Patrons got the news segment, a whole 30-minute chunk of this video a week early while I worked on editing everything that you saw in the history half of the video there, and I think that they really enjoyed that, and there is a lot more on the way for all of you guys. A rule that I'm applying to myself going forward is, just for the time being, no more giant epistles like this because they take forever. This video took forever, and I know that you guys want regular news videos. You want to know what's going on a weekly basis at the parks, so that's what I'm going to bring to you guys going forward. And there is some exciting news that I've been hearing will be coming from Disney very soon, so I'm looking forward to covering all of that as well. Not everything happening at Disney is drained rivers and American history getting wiped out, so that is very exciting. There's some stuff that is not of that nature, that is much more positive, that is much more forward-looking, and I think suggests that maybe things are on the up and up at Imagineering that I'm very excited to cover here for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. I'll get to it. From the Mickey Views Magic Studio, this is Brayden. Have a magical day.